No one leaves a country they once believed was the promised land easily. People only leave when staying becomes too expensive, not just in money, but also in time, health, and even trust. The UK is once again right on the cusp today. Ancient buildings, a strict legal system, a large economy, and the promise of a stable life if you work hard enough. There was a time when that was almost the default when people thought of England. But now, that promise no longer works as it used to. Every morning when they wake up, many British residents no longer think about the future, but rather how long they can hold on. 1.8 million people have quietly left the UK in the last 3 years, starting from 2023. They are full-time workers but don't earn enough to afford decent rent. They are regular taxpayers but no longer believe in public services. They are people living in a wealthy country, but they always feel precarious, as if standing on quicksand. In today's video, join us as we trace that journey of retreat, starting with seemingly ordinary events, bills, rent, gas prices, doctors' waiting lists, and the feeling that no matter how hard you try, you're still falling behind. Going to work used to be a very simple social contract. You put in your time, effort, and discipline, and in return, you got a minimum standard of living, enough to keep the house warm, enough to eat, and a little left over for savings. But in Britain today, that agreement seems to have been broken. People are still going to work, even working full days and hours, but the minimum wage part is no longer happening. You can walk the streets of London at midnight and see many people wandering around. At first glance, they look like homeless people, but that's not the case. Many of them still have homes to go back to. They just don't want to. Because there are houses so cold that people don't dare turn on the heat. And there are also people who work 5 to 6 days a week but still have to rely on the community shop to get through the week. Here, poverty is no longer an image of unemployment or lack of effort. It's the state of someone who has tried but still can't keep up with life. That feeling of being out of breath started with the meal, but it wasn't just about being hungry. Meals become risk management, going to the market based on promotions, running from one supermarket to another to hunt for prices. No longer buying once for the whole week, but having to buy little by little each day because there isn't enough money to stock up when a meal becomes a problem. Rest is no longer recovery. Workers describe a bitter paradox. Being off for half a week should be a relief, but in reality, it's more time to worry. Being home all day means watching the gas, watching the electricity, and wondering what to eat this week. This mindset is like living in a room with a lack of oxygen. It still helps the body maintain life, but it's always in a state of near death. It's no longer an isolated incident either. A slice of Yorkshire shows that poverty is not on the margins. The area is cited as having nearly a quarter of its population living in poverty, and the northeast is even worse. There, the community shop became a buffer between rising prices and stagnant wages. A single mother is only allowed to visit once a week, paying a few pounds for basic items like eggs, bananas, and potatoes, ordinary things that now feel as significant as a steak at a 4-star Michelin restaurant. But what's remarkable is something else. Those who are struggling are also only working part-time. But the paradox is that this struggling state is still above the threshold to receive assistance, not qualifying for food bank use. Poverty here isn't just about lacking money, it's also about being trapped in a structure that's not poor enough on paper. The picture becomes even more unsightly when emergency services, designed for unusual situations, become commonplace. There are reports that in 2022 to 2023, the food aid system distributed nearly 3 million emergency assistance packages, a significant increase from the previous year. Hundreds of thousands of people sought assistance for the first time. The important thing is, a significant portion of them are still employed, and a great many children living in households are receiving food assistance. That struck directly at the social contract. The problem wasn't that people weren't working. The problem was that work was no longer within reach of the bare minimum. The government had the familiar answer. Work is the best way out of poverty. along with announcements about large-scale cost-of-living support packages and household support funds. So, if going to work is an escape, why do working people still have to choose between staying warm and eating, still have to count every penny, and still describe life as just holding on? The country still reached a record number of employed people. But many jobs are precarious. Even if inflation decreases, real income cannot keep pace with the rising cost of essential goods. People are still working, even harder than ever, but it still wasn't enough to buy stability. And when a meal becomes a matter of survival tactics, the next thing to break down is usually not the will, but the roof, because rent is a non-negotiable expense. Housing used to be an anchor. Neo allows a person to cling to a place, to cling to a life. Now in England, that anchor seems to have become a stone tied around the neck. It's not because anyone is lazy or demanding too much. It's just that the problem has changed. Rent and housing costs have ballooned. While a family's affordability is limited, figures never lie. The ONS recorded that average private rents across the UK increased by 5.0% in the 12 months to October 2025, with the average rent being approximately £1,360 per month. Hearing the word average sounds pleasant. But for renters, average often doesn't exist. They live by contract, by renewal period, by an email announcing a price increase that arrives just as salaries and working hours are being cut. And rent doesn't just make things more expensive. It triggered a domino effect. People leave the area near their workplace to find cheaper housing, trading time for it, an extra hour on the train, 2 more bus routes, and hurried mornings. At some point, you no longer ask, "Do I like this place?" You just ask, "Can I handle this pace of life?" Housing becomes a silent machine that slowly drains your energy a little bit each day until you look back and realize you only have enough strength to survive, go to work, and pay rent. Another pressing issue is attached: the quality of housing. Moldy, cold, poor insulation. Those things aren't on the performance leaderboard, but they're in the lungs, in the sleep, in the bills. If the house is cold, the bill increases. When the bill goes up, the meal shrinks. When meals are reduced, health declines. And so we return to the original question: do we work to stabilize ourselves? Or do we work to keep up with the things that are pushing us to the edge? The system sometimes talks a lot about self-reliance, but designs a market where self-reliance means bearing the risk yourself. And housing doesn't stand alone. It leads to a belief in the basic things around it: water, the environment, infrastructure. Event duration monitoring data shows that in 2023, there were 464,056 storm overflow discharges in England, a 54% increase compared to 2022. This isn't some distant political issue. It's a very everyday feeling. You pay for living expenses, but in return, places that were meant for walking, fishing, taking your grandchildren to the beach, become something you have to think about. Not everyone will leave. Many people still stay because of family, memories, or community. But the growing question is, what does a nation hold its people with when the roof is no longer a place to recover, but a place to increase burdens? So, for you, what does stability in housing mean? Reasonable rent, a longer lease, or simply not having to worry about renewal day? If you had to choose, what would you cut first? The size of your house, your commute time, or the quality of life within the house itself? Please share your thoughts in the comments section, and don't forget to hit the subscribe button on the channel, and when the anchor called home begins to loosen, we will see the next thing. Money is no longer just a number. It became a state of mind, something that wore people out even before their wallets hit rock bottom. People often talk about the economy as something that's on the news: inflation, growth, interest rates. But for many families in the UK, economics is no longer a concept. It's a state of being. My heart beats faster when I open the letter. The weight gets heavier as the direct debit date approaches. And sleep was as thin as paper, because my mind kept repeating one question: will we survive this month? The 2022 energy shock left a very clear psychological mark. At that time, the price cap for a typical household was mentioned as being around £3,549 per year from October 2022. You might forget the number, but it's hard to forget the feeling. Turning on the heat became a financial decision, no longer a normal reflex. Later, when the numbers go down, the worry doesn't just disappear. Because many people have managed to accumulate debt, form the habit of lowering standards to survive, and maintain low standards as a form of self-defense. Fuel poverty is not a complaint. It's measurable. In England, in 2023, an estimated 13.0% of households, approximately 3.17 million households, lived in fuel poverty according to the official measure. This number says something very bluntly. For millions of families, energy is no longer a service, but a matter of survival, and when energy is the problem, everything else becomes a subtraction. Skipping meals, cutting back on time, missing social activities, even sacrificing the smallest joys. Here, money doesn't just make you poor, it's exhausting. You start delaying your doctor's appointment because you think, let's wait another week and see. You switch to cheaper, more filling, but less nutritious foods. You sleep less, are more irritable, and blame yourself more, as if this were a personal ethics test. In reality, it's like a reverse escalator. You keep walking, but you still feel like you're being pulled back. Stress also feeds into the belief that if you're sick, there's the NHS, because now, being sick is not just an illness. Being sick is a risk of time. NHS. England recorded that by the end of June 2025, approximately 7.4 million pathways were awaiting treatment, and 61.5% were waiting for 18 weeks, meaning a very large proportion still had to wait longer. As waiting became the norm, people built their own alternative systems, borrowing, asking relatives, paying for private services if possible, or enduring. And immediately, society stratified according to a cruel criterion. Those with reserves lived more easily, those without them depleted faster. On a macroeconomic level, the OBR had previously warned that living standards, measured by real household disposable income, would face the largest drop in modern data during the 2022 to 23 and 2023 to 24 periods. Despite cushioning policies, have you noticed yourself or someone around you entering the stress economy, living out of fear instead of living according to a plan? What do you think is more dangerous, rising bills, or the fact that we're starting to consider it normal? The future doesn't disappear in a big bang. It disappears in small delays. Postponing buying a house because the down payment keeps outrunning my salary, delaying having children because childcare is so expensive, it's like a second mortgage. I'm delaying changing jobs because if I'm out for just 1 month, the whole family system will collapse. And then one day, people will no longer ask, "What will I be doing in the next 5 years?" They asked, "Can I handle the next 5 months?" In Britain, this feeling of a cancelled future is not just a personal perception. It began to appear in the numbers of people leaving. According to official estimates, approximately 693,000 people will leave the UK long-term in the year ending June 2025. Of course, not everyone leaves out of desperation. Some go to study, some return to their home country, and some seek new opportunities. But that scale is still a social signal. Leaving is significant enough that it cannot be considered a side story. And what's remarkable is the intention to leave is becoming very normal. A survey by the British Council states that approximately 72% of young people aged 18 to 30 in the UK say they are considering living and working abroad in the short or long term. When a number like that appears, it's no longer a matter of youthful adventurousness. It's like a poll of confidence. Is staying still a reasonable option? Or just the familiar one? That reasonableness often starts with small but hard things like stone, housing. You can cut back on meals, you can reduce heating, but you can't cut back on rent. Childcare. According to OECD data, the net cost of childcare in the UK was once estimated to be around 19% of the average wage, about 10% higher than the OECD average. Simply put, having a child is not just about love, it's a financial plan, and more people feel they're not qualified to create one. And so the dream transformed. The dream is no longer a small house. It became a predictable system. It's no longer advancement, but rather not falling below the standard. It's no longer freedom of choice, but rather good enough to choose. Some people would call that reality. Some people call it a loss. Perhaps they are both right. Many people frankly share that. We no longer have a 5-year plan. We have a plan until Friday. That sounds really bitter, because when the future is broken down into weeks, people begin to live as if they are running away from their own lives. Low wages has never sounded like a simple issue. But in England, what many people find more stifling is something more subtle. A low pace of life. You're still going to work. You're still trying. You might even get a nominal raise, but the feeling that life isn't progressing, even regressing, still lingers. Like walking against the wind up a long hill with no rest stops. What does low vitality mean in everyday life? It's no longer about extra work to have an extra vacation or improve your life, but to make up for the bare minimum. Rent, bills, food, transportation. It's about saving no longer being a plan, but a safety net so that if your car breaks down, your child gets sick, or just a strange bill appears, you don't fall straight to the bottom. And when a society forces people to use all their energy to maintain balance, they will have no energy left to look towards the future. There are very direct macro warnings. In a November 2022 analysis box, the OBR stated that living standards in 2022 to 23 and 2023 to 24 are projected to decline the most on record, if I had to put it in everyday language. There was a period when, even if you did everything right, you still felt like you were falling behind, because the price shock exceeded the rate at which income could compensate. This explains why the feeling of being out of breath spread beyond the poorest group. It affected even those who thought they were doing okay. And it's not just a short-term shock. The Resolution Foundation calls this a much longer-lasting underlying condition. They estimate that 15 years of economic stagnation have left a lost wages gap of around £11,000 per year for workers compared to the trajectory if incomes had grown in a more normal way. That's not the cash that was taken from my pocket today. It's like a silent loss. You don't realize you're missing it because it's the part you would have had if things hadn't slowed down for so long. The consumer market also reflects many issues as people are caught up in the packaging economy, smaller packages, cheaper options, buying by deal, and the feeling of the same amount of money, but the bag is lighter. Here, a raise is sometimes only enough for you to continue, paying for the privilege of going to work, and when working hard is no longer a good enough strategy for a stable life, people will seek other strategies, change cities, change careers, or change countries where the relationship between labor and life is less disrupted. What do you think? What makes people want to leave the most their current salary, or the feeling that in 10 years I'll still be in the same place? And if you had to choose one thing to fix first, would you choose to raise wages or reduce essential expenses so that the cost of living could be brought down? If you've listened this far and feel heavy, perhaps the story is gradually becoming a shared sentiment for all of us. Because this isn't a story about a few people complaining. This is the story of a fraying social contract, working hard but no longer being sure of buying a stable life, housing becoming a fixed burden, money turning into chronic stress, the future shrinking to a week at a time, and finally, leaving no longer being a romantic dream, but a survival option. I'm not saying England is all gloomy. There are still people living well. There are still kind communities. and there are still very British moments that make you want to stay. But perhaps the problem lies in the fact that a nation cannot live forever on memories of its golden age. Memory is like a lamp in a bar, warm, beautiful, and sometimes not bright enough to pay the rent. What do you think pushes people away the most? Rent, bills, health, or the feeling of no longer having a future? And if you could only fix one thing right now, would you fix income or essential expenses so people could regain their momentum for life? If you've ever lived in the UK, are living there now, or have left, please leave a comment. I'd like to hear your story. What was the moment that made you realize, I can't live here anymore? And if you're still staying, what's keeping you? If this video helped you see the issue more clearly, please like, subscribe, and share it with a friend you think will need to hear this. It's not about creating drama, but about ensuring these kinds of conversations don't stay confined to the bar or private messages. This video is made for the purpose of social analysis and commentary based on public sources, statistics, and recorded experiences. The numbers may change over time and according to each agency's measurement methods. The content is not intended to attack or accuse any individual, nor does it encourage hatred towards any group of people. If you have opposing or supplementary data sources, please share them in the comments. I'm happy to update and correct in future videos.